Imagine a world where social classes simply do not exist. Education is free for everyone, systemic oppression is entirely eliminated, and every ounce of wealth is distributed among the people who actually do the work. If this design accounts for every basic human need, why has it never successfully translated into a functioning society? To understand the theory, you have to look at the environment that created it. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Industrial Revolution was generating a staggering amount of new wealth, largely driven by the invention of the steam engine. But that wealth was violently concentrated at the top. The people actually operating the machines and producing the goods were facing brutal exploitation, working grueling hours while barely surviving on meager wages. This massive disparity between those owning the machines and those operating them created a volatile environment, ripe for a radical new theory of labor. Observing this economy in the mid-19th century, a philosopher named Karl Marx saw a stark injustice. Business owners were hoarding all the profits, while the workers generating the actual value took home almost nothing. Marx, alongside his collaborator Friedrich Engels, began to shape these observations into a comprehensive political and economic theory. Together, they introduced the world to their solution, the Communist Manifesto. The core mechanism of their idea was straightforward. The working class, the proletariat, needed to officially unite. They would forcefully seize the capital and the means of production directly from the business owners. Once seized, control over all production would be handed to the state. The state would reorganize society, eliminate classes, and eventually voluntarily dissolve itself, leaving behind a perfectly equal world. This blueprint is a logical masterpiece on paper, but its survival depends entirely on how it handles the fundamental mechanics of risk and human motivation. The first major tension in the theory is how it views risk. Marx calculated business profit strictly as a theft from labor, completely ignoring where the initial capital actually comes from. Building a business requires an entrepreneur to save money, secure loans, and invest capital. When they do that, they are personally absorbing the risk of total financial ruin or crippling debt. Profit isn't an automatic guarantee. It is the specific reward for taking on that initial financial risk, something the individual employee doesn't have to bear. If you institute a system where profits are distributed equally to everyone, including those who took zero risk to build the enterprise, the core incentive to invent or create value entirely vanishes. You inevitably end up with a stagnant society. Everyone desires the financial security of being an employee, but absolutely no one is willing to take the risk required to become an employer. Removing the reward for risk doesn't simply redistribute wealth fairly, it stalls the core engine that creates economic value in the first place. We hit the psychological flaw. Communism operates on the assumption that humanity can artificially move as a single coordinated unit toward an abstract collective goal. But in the natural world, biological survival and progress are driven by individual self-interest. Humans naturally prioritize improving their own lives and the lives of their immediate families, not an anonymous stranger halfway across the country. When personal effort is completely decoupled from personal reward, individual motivation drops. Why work twice as hard if the benefit to your own life is exactly zero? To enforce this unnatural equality, the communist timeline requires its most dangerous operational step. The state must seize absolute, unquestioned control over all resources, property, and capital. According to the blueprint, the state is then supposed to voluntarily dissolve itself to achieve true utopia. But as history shows us, that never happens. Individuals or ruling bodies that successfully obtain absolute, unchecked power do not willingly surrender it. The system builds a trap for itself. By aggressively centralizing power to mandate economic equality, the ideology inadvertently creates a permanent, unchallengeable authoritarian regime. The failure of communism stems from a fundamental mismatch. The system is built for a version of human psychology and economics that simply doesn't exist. However, acknowledging the objective failure of communism does not mean we have to accept capitalism as a flawless system. The brutal exploitation Marx originally observed in those early factories was very real, and modern economies still struggle deeply with severe wealth inequality. Vastly complex global problems simply cannot be solved by one-dimensional, extreme utopian ideologies. The true ongoing challenge of human society is doing the difficult, constant work of maintaining a dynamic balance, preserving the necessary engine of personal incentive, while upholding the moral requirement of a robust social safety net.